Eric, like I said, appreciate you hopping on here. And I think I first really kind of came across like your name. I believe you were on the Moffat Method podcast a while back,
Yep.
which again, for anybody that's on here that does not know what I'm talking about, that's a highly recommended podcast that you guys should all go listen to. Coach Tommy Moffat, obviously longtime strength coach at LSU. He's now at Texas A&M, kind of back in the trenches doing things. So I heard of you on there. A couple of things that were brought up. Hopefully, we'll get to talk to you today. I know I reached out to you back then, and we kind of just my schedule just never really let me follow up. But now that I've been doing this, you were one of the first people that was, like I said, outside of my network that I know has been in the game for a while and has been at a place that you guys have been successful. So I definitely wanted to kind of try to get you on here. So I appreciate it, and hopefully we can get some good information out there today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and start off. Just some basic stuff like what's your title? What's your kind of your day to day role and responsibilities? Even what teams do you work with at UND? And then we'll kind of have some follow ups from there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Head strength and conditioning coach. You know, in terms of like my day to day, I work directly with football, men's basketball, volleyball, and softball. So those are the four teams that I directly head up. Um, you know, my assistants, my GAs, my interns, whoever it might be, my volunteer coaches, they're going to play a role in football. They're going to play a role with basketball. We get a little bit of involvement with them with volleyball. Typically with softball, I take them myself, but um, so I when I first started, and I'm in my 14th year here at University of Indianapolis, I've been a strength coach in the private sector, the high school level, and now the collegiate level, all in all for 22 years. Um, but there was a time when I took over this job where I had every team. So I was in charge of 21 teams. We are now at about, going into this year, we're going to be at about 25 teams. We just recently added 4 teams going into this year, and that's kind of a long story in of itself. But um, so, you know, my staff consists of a full-time assistant and 2 grad assistants. I've also got a couple volunteer coaches that I think are going to, be around for the year and can help us out. And, I have a tendency to also have some friends outside of here that are strength coaches at the high school level that'll send their kids here, and they'll volunteer for us and help us out coaching wise. And so I'll take help wherever I can get it. And I think it's been a very valuable tool for us in terms of just having some extra help with setup all the way up to demoing lifts and things like that. And so um, that's kind of it in a nutshell as far as where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, and very similar to obviously like when you took the job at UND, because I know when I took the job at Fairmont, I was the first strength coach, and we have 17 different teams, 13 different sports.
Mhm.
Um, but when I took the job, I was the first person in the history of the school to have the job of like head strength coach, where I was essentially in charge of all the teams. Now I've started to be able to delegate with once I've started to have these GAs and people that I can, assistant
Yep.
coaches that I can trust and things. But when you took the job at UND, was it, how much different was it that first couple years versus what it is now in terms of, the number of student athletes you had, the number of, you don't have to get into like actual dollar amounts, but just the financial support, the resources, things like that. Like, was there a prior head strength coach that oversaw
No.
everything like what you do now? Like what's basically that progression been like over the last 10 years?
Yeah. So when I started out, I was the very first strength coach that the school had ever really employed. What they did is they had contracted out through, like, I think it was Velocity at the time, and they were just having people come in and working with certain teams and doing that kind of thing. And it was just kind of, I mean, it is what you think it is when
Yeah,
you're
that's
it.
that's how Fairmont was.
Yeah. And um, so when I took the job, we were in about a 2,200 square foot weight room. We had like I think we had 3 racks. We didn't have any platforms. We had 3 benches. So what we did is we just, when you don't really have a budget, you kind of just got to go and ask and see what sticks and what doesn't. So we ended up with 6 racks. I built my own platforms in the beginning. So we myself, my dad, we came in when I first got the job and built 6 Olympic platforms for us to use. So we ended up having 6 of everything, and so we had kind of had it crammed into that one little space. But we made it work, and we used hallways. We used classrooms that weren't being used. We would utilize those. We utilized whatever we could use. We'd have the posts outside in the hallway to do battling ropes. I mean, thankfully our head athletic trainer at the time, his daughter was big into lifting and all that, and she just happened to be a freshman at the time. And so I brought her on as like my very first intern. I just needed another set of eyes to be able to be in the room or out in the hallway when we had groups split. And typical, we had a whiteboard that I had to just kind of separate and put the workouts for each team, and off we went. It was very much a unified type of program at the time, so there wasn't a lot of differentiation between the teams and in the way that they were training, and I've kind of stuck to that even now. All of these lifts are good for any athlete, right? So but anyway, that's we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I mean, we would just have to get very creative with how we scheduled our teams to come through, how many we could have in at a time. I'm sure a lot of times we kind of broke code by having far more athletes in there than was probably allowed. But as time went on, I got a part-time assistant. I was able to get some more interns, things like that. So we were able to kind of space ourselves out, but I really was in control of every team at the time.
So have you guys been able to do some renovations? Do you guys have a bigger space and more stuff now?
Yeah. So the first job I had when I got hired was we're going to host the 2011 one of the Super Bowl teams, because the Super Bowl was in Indy in 12, I believe. And so the Giants used our facility as a practice facility. So what they did is they had all the plans drawn up. They're going to build it. We're in a bubble now, but it was a parking lot. So, okay, you're going to get a 6,000 square foot weight room, thanks to the NFL coming in and kind of throwing some money in there. And so it's your job to design it. Okay, so I went around and I did my homework, and I reached out to all the people I trust and know and all that. And I mean, you got to remember, I'm only about, I've only been in this thing for 7, 8 years at the time. I was at the high school level. I was really kind of putting a lot of trust in the high schools. Thankfully, here in Indiana, we have a lot of big weight rooms with a lot of really good coaches that make a lot of money. Just so you guys know, I'm not one of those people, but I'm just saying the high school coaches make good money in Indiana. So for those of you guys that are looking for jobs, if an Indiana job comes open, take a look at it. But I used a lot of the ideas I got from the people I knew at the high school level, and I ventured out. And Coach Moffitt was obviously one of the first people I reached out to, and he was very helpful in helping me design the room that we're currently in. But right now we're in a 6,000 square foot weight room, and just outside, I mean, just through the doors is about 9,200 square feet of 200-meter indoor track, 50 yards of turf. I mean, we've got a better setup than a lot of your low to mid-major universities probably have. And that's thanks to, hosting the Super Bowl and then building this up so that we could, be the practice site for the New York Giants that year. And so, that we took advantage of that money, and, we're still, the thing about it is we're still kind of working off of no budget. It's just kind of whatever I ask for, it's either, you're taking a shot in the dark on certain things, but we're still working out of the same racks that we brought in, 12 years ago. Um, we're still working off the same floor, same platforms, a lot of that stuff. We just got to make sure we take care of our stuff.
Yeah, no, and that's awesome to hear. I mean, it's very fortunate that the Super Bowl and all that kind of went through. But yeah, I mean, it's very similar to just at the D2 level. It's kind of what we were talking about at the beginning, just being able to make do with what you have and
Yep.
not let any circumstances, limited space, limited coaching staff, whatever it may be, kind of hold us back from being able to still deliver some solid training. So, I have this kind of one here, and my mind can go a thousand different ways with how to ask this, but I guess what I like to think about is like when you sit down as a coach and you think about kind of like your overarching standards, as just a person and as a coach and kind of how we want the weight room ran, and then on the flip side of that, what's kind of like your main philosophies or principles or pillars in terms of actually training. So kind of from that mental and that culture standpoint, and then just in general, like training. Like obviously, this is an example, but like some people are very West Side or die mentality, which I think there's great stuff about West Side and conjugate system. But I think there's you also have to do some other stuff as well. So like as an example, like culture, and then also from a training philosophy.
Yeah. So, and I heard this a long time ago. So philosophies are kind of a battle of PhDs, really, when it comes down to it, if you really think about it. So therefore, we want to base our programs off of the sound principles that have kind of stood the test of time in strength and conditioning, right? So I mean, overload progression, balance development, technique, variety periodization, all those things factor in. Now, my so I'll kind of go back and tell you where I came from and how I got to where I am now. So I never had a strength coach in high school. I never had a strength coach in college. Training, I was more of a guy that was into the preparation than I was the actual sport, I guess. That kind of thing. You've heard a million strength coaches say that, but it's the truth. And so I was always kind of training myself. Well, I get through college and I've got to keep that competitive edge. So I start powerlifting, right? Well, the first thing you go to as a power lifter in 1998 or whatever year it was is Westside Barbell, right? Louis Simmons. So I get on the phone with Louis Simmons and we're chatting about training. I make friends with guys that train at Westside Barbell. I never went and trained there myself, but I come from crappy old hole in the wall gyms that have bent bars that are rusted. You're lucky stuff didn't break on you. Like that's what I came from. I came from just you find a place to train where guys would train hard and wanted to compete and that kind of thing, and you stuck with it, and it led to me having a fairly decent, powerlifting career, 100% drug free type of thing. I wasn't trying to get to that kind of level where a lot of those West Side Barbell guys were going, but you're learning that West Side philosophy. I've got a filing cabinet full of West Side Barbell, and then how those guys branched off and developed their own style of training different from what Louis did. And then so I get my first job at Indian Creek High School, which is at the time was a 2A high school here in Indiana. It's a farm community. So I have a bunch of farm kids that work hard. They work on the farm, they chew tobacco, and they lift weights and they play football. That's what they do. And it was great. It was awesome. But I took my kids to a lift meet that we did at one of the local high schools. It was just kind of your typical bench squat, maybe clean, I think. But I get there and I see kids from Milan High School, and Mark Garrett at the time was the strength coach there. And I watch his kids warm up, and they're snatching, they're cleaning, they're doing jerks, and I'm like, that's what I want my kids to look like. Like I want them to move with that kind of speed and aggression and intent. That's what I want my kids to look like. So I immediately go over to Coach Garrett, and I kid you not, this was 20, what, 25, 26, 27 years ago, something like that. We still talk every week to this day. And he got me into Olympic weightlifting, right? And so I'm like, all right, how can I take these variations of Olympic weightlifting that I'm learning? I'm going and doing the USAWs. Um, you know, I'm constantly asking questions. I'm showing up to events that I haven't signed up for. I just want to be a fly on the wall. So I got to doing that, and Coach Garrett's directed me and all these people, and Mike Bergner's one of them. And so I took Mike Bergner's course, and you know how it is, man. You power lift, and all of a sudden you start snatching and jerking and doing all these things. I mean, I was beat up. But I was learning how to do Olympic weightlifting by Olympic weightlifting, right? I wasn't just watching videos and just reading about it. I had to get out there and do it. And I know my staff would laugh at me now because I can barely move as it is. But, you know, so I was like, hey, coach, like, I don't have the money to do the course over and over again. I just want to be a fly on the wall. I just want to like pick up on information I may have missed the first time. And he goes, well, why don't you come help us coach it? So that was another gig that I had on the side of being a high school strength coach, is I was helping do Olympic weightlifting certifications for Mike Bergner. And that led me to doing some USAW certifications and all that kind of thing. But point being, I've got this powerlifting background. I'm learning Olympic weightlifting. I'm now teaching Olympic weightlifting. I'm now starting to get into studying, different, other different philosophies, and really, once it started to come around on the computer, it wasn't looking through Flex magazine and Powerlifting USA anymore. Now you could get on the computer and see what people were doing, but I tell you, 99% of my upbringing in this field was going and visiting people and talking to them face to face and spending time with them. And just, I'm never bothered by a young coach that asks questions or wants to be, because that's who I was. I was the one who was like, constantly poking them in the shoulder, like, hey, teach me this, or can I come back tomorrow? That kind of thing. But it was a lot of time. I'm trying to, at the time I was actually working a full-time job, being a strength coach in the morning and in the evening. And then, also going and visiting all these people. And I'm trying to learn from, some of these coaches that are being recommended to me that are I'm told they're the best, that kind of thing. So what I did, I mean, obviously you take all that information, and now how do I make that applicable and work for my athletes here at the Division II level? And the thing I love about high school and the thing I love about Division II is the development piece of it, right? I've worked with professional athletes. I've worked with, pretty good genetic, people, and it's a different world. But at the D2 level, I love the development side of it, because there's all, how it is. A lot of our kids, there's a reason why they're here and not at the D1 level, right? Like, let's just call it what it is. And is it maybe they're a step too slow? Maybe they're, 10 pounds too heavy or too light or whatever it might be. And, with the transfer portal now, you're getting some more talented kids that maybe get passed up at the high schools. But it's the development part of this that I love, and that I want my coaches to have an appreciation for, and just kind of see how far we can get them, before they transfer, really, is what how it goes. But that's kind of, so like I said, not one main philosophy that I ever go by. It's very principle based. Kind of the motto that we go by is do it right, do it fast, and then do it heavy. And I want our athletes to go by that, and I want our coaches to do it that way every time too. So do it right is just technique. All right, we got to be proficient from a technical standpoint in everything that we do, and not perfect necessarily, but proficient. Okay, and so we have a progression for every lift that we do. Everything we do has a progression to it, right? So that's kind of where our exercise pool starts to be developed. Um, and you kind of determine, you assess a kid as soon as he comes in, and there's a whole process to that I'm sure we'll get into, but um, we want to make sure that from a technical standpoint they're proficient. Then from there we speed things up. So that's do it fast. Okay. Once we start to do it fast, if technique breaks down, we regress, we go back, we fix it, and we start to speed it up again. And then do it heavy is a very relative term. And I'm sure it's that way for you guys too. I don't have a specific like standard. If you're a offensive lineman that's a junior, you should be doing this much. Like, I'm not worried about that kind of stuff. I don't know if you've ever met a strength coach that doesn't worry about numbers more than me. That I just kind of let the numbers happen. And then when you stand back and kind of look at it, you're like, oh, we have 20 guys that, clean over 300 pounds and do it, explosively, violently, with great intent, very well technically. That's going to carry over onto the field. And so I want my coaches to coach that way too. Don't be driven by numbers. Don't chase numbers. I'm telling you right now, don't chase numbers. Let the numbers happen by doing things the right way and moving the bar fast, or whatever implement you're using, but that's kind of the way that we operate.
No, that was a ton of awesome information, and I think the a couple things stand out. Number one, I know for a fact the do it right, do it fast, do it heavy was something that you talked about on the Moffitt method, and that was something that I remember specifically standing out because it's one of those things where like I've been in a lot of different places, and every coach talks about like the technical aspect of it, but a lot of people are so, and in some places do it really well, and I'm a big believer in that. Like I came kind of from that WVU football strength coach mentality, and one of our big guys was Daryl Bauer, and he's big on the whole rep integrity and stuff like that, and that's something that probably the biggest takeaway that I had from them is the idea of rep integrity, of making every rep be the best rep it can be, and part of that is doing it right, but the other part of it is having the right weight on the bar. If it's too heavy, you're not going to move it the right way. And if it's too light, then you're also not going to move it the way that we want you to move it. So I think that's huge. I think a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes more so are wanting to just try to jump in weights all the time. And it's like, guys, it's just, especially in season, long semesters, like that's just not going to happen. One of the things that I always say is I don't care what you squat at the end of your freshman year. I want to make sure that you can squat at the end of I want to make sure that you can actually still squat at the end of your senior year, like that you're not so beat up and that you haven't had something happen so that by the time you're a senior, like I'm more worried about what is your squat by the time you're a senior, not what it is at the end of your freshman or sophomore year, because we're playing the long game. Like you said, it's a developmental thing. We're playing the long game, especially at this level. That's why I also love being at this level. I just think we make, other than maybe at the high school level, I think we make the biggest impact, or we have the opportunity to make the biggest positive impact at this level. One of the things that you mentioned too about kind of being on a pull philosophies, with kind of the powerlifting background and the Olympic weightlifting influence. And it's one of the things where like two of my favorite kind of influences are Louis Simmons, which I love the one thing you said about having horrible technique. Like what's Louis' quote of don't have a $100 pair of shoes and a $10 squat or whatever it is.
Exactly.
I love being able to have the Louis influence for my own well-being, but also on the same side of it, I also love Mike Boyle. And it's like those two guys are almost polar opposites, but it's because they look at things in a different way. And it's like the balance is somewhere in between. Like,
sure.
I think lifting heavy and having your max effort day and your dynamic effort days are important. I also think unilateral training is extremely, extremely underutilized and extremely valuable. And it's one of those things where to me, it's we have to be able to, as a coach, pick and choose, what parts of those principles fit kind of the athlete. And again, that's the biggest thing, fit the athlete, because like you said, a lot of your teams are training very similar. And that's how I say 90% of what our athletes do are the same, but it's our basketball team might be doing hand supported squats, because they're just not good at being in that squat position. Whereas like our acrobatics and tumbling girls can squat ass to grass with 3 times body weight, some of them. So
Yep.
it's one of those things where, like, I'm not going to force, round peg into a square hole, or other
Exactly.
way around, square peg into a round hole, something like that.
Yeah. But yeah. And you talk about like Mike Boyle, and I think this is good for a lot of the young coaches to understand, like, you're going to figure out throughout time that you're going to agree and disagree with a lot of coaches. So there's some things, just because a guy like Boyle may not really be into the Olympic lifts or like the Olympic lifts much, even though I do, I'm still going to take some things from Boyle in terms of, unilateral work. I think one of the great things, a big part of like our template that we use and the way we construct our lifts comes from Boyle. And so, you're gonna agree and disagree with a lot of coaches, but I think you can learn something from everybody.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's something that we have to be. If you came up in a powerlifting mindset or came up in an Olympic weightlifting mindset, like, you have to be able to realize that is a sport in and of itself. Both of those are sports in and of themselves, and we have to be able to pick and choose the good things, because there's a lot of good things that we can learn from powerlifters, and a lot of good things that we can learn from Olympic weightlifters, and the adaptations that both of those sports provide. Same as, like, if you're coming from a track and field background, like, there's a lot of good stuff that we can learn from, the guys at Exos or Altus or whatever it is, like, and taking that to our speed development stuff. So,
Exactly.
So in terms of, so we'll kind of start with like football and then maybe get into some basketball. But in terms of like what your guys' football, so I mean, what are you doing right now? Do you have guys on campus now? I'm assuming you guys do. What does that kind of schedule look like? And then what does your in-season schedule, and kind of, just, you don't have to go into like every X's and O's of the lift, but like, if you guys lift twice a week, what does each of those days lift? If you lift 3 days a week in season, what do each of those days look like? And just kind of a normal in-season schedule for your football guys.
Okay. So right now, currently we're we've got about, I would say, 60 to 70 guys per day coming in, and we train in the mornings. So we have a group that starts at 6:30 in the morning, and then we have a group that starts at 8 o'clock. And so our day kind of looks like this. So we'll come in, we have the guys do some prehab work. We call it weak link. So basically what happens is, when the players come in initially as freshmen, they go through our whole physical process, but they also go through, it's not an FMS, but it's kind of an FMS type version that our trainers have made up. And I don't really know what it is. And I don't really care, to be honest, what they're doing. But what the information that they're passing along to me and my staff is, all right, this player has, his weak link is going to be his hamstrings, or it's going to be the hip, it's going to be the ankle, knee, whatever. And then we categorize those guys, and I have a coach that takes each of those parts. And so the first thing we do when we get in, before we even get into our warm up, is we do our weak link work. And it in the beginning, it could take 8 to 10 minutes, and now we've got it down to where it's about 5 minutes long, and it's just going to be some of that, I call it fluff type stuff, but it's more AT driven than it is strength and conditioning driven. And to be quite honest with you, we started doing this 5 or 6 years ago, and it's really cut down on, we didn't have a ton of soft tissue, but it's cut down on that even more. So it's been really helpful. Our players enjoy it. They like it. It's a lot of work with bands, and it's a lot of work with, there's some balance type stuff in there. That just, my coaches do a great job of running that, and it's their responsibility to get with the athletic trainers to go through what exercises they're going to have them do in that time period and that kind of thing. So that's how we start. Then we get into our, just kind of a general warm up, work into our speed development. And then from there, we come in the weight room, we get our lift going, we finish with a little bit of flexibility work and that kind of thing. And so we've kind of touched all the bases that we need to touch, but we're Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So Wednesdays is when like our O line and D line guys will do their O line school, D line school, whatever it is. In the afternoons on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I believe, is when our skill guys will do their 7-on-7 work and positional work, that kind of thing. We take ourselves out of that. I know sometimes you got some strength staffs that, monitor that or run it. And I'm like, hey, listen, we're not football coaches. That's not our area. The players, at some point in time, the players have to take control of this and not be, we can't hold their hand through everything. It's always coming from us, the encouragement, like, hey, if we're going to be a good football team, this is what needs to happen. You need to be doing this and this and this, and you're going to have to be, holding yourselves accountable. And so our guys always have done a great job, and it continues, and that's part of the culture that's been built here. And so that's our summer, and really we have a little bit longer summer than maybe most. We start second week of May, and we go all the way up to camp, but we give them, there's 2 weeks that we give them off. So really it's about a 10-week summer. I know a lot of summers typically are about 8, but we go 10. I just don't like for our guys to get away for too long in May, because I'm not sure if we'll get them back. Our coaches do a great job of corralling them and keeping them here, but you know how it is. It's a non-mandatory period and all that. So
yeah, I want to cut you off real quick because that's honestly, it's my biggest, I hate the summers the most at this level because of being, especially for our fall sports, like not just football, but even volleyball and soccer. It's just frustrating for me because you get basically, our soccer team will come back and have like literally 2 weeks of practice and have to line up and try to play a game. And they'll probably have a scrimmage. And it's like, that's when we see most of our injuries happen those first 2 or 3 weeks because they haven't trained all summer. And like, we use an app so I can kind of see who's doing stuff over the summer if they're following it. But other than that, like if they don't want to do that and they say they're training with their own trainer at home, like, okay, like I don't have no way to double check that and confirm that. And, it's just, it's the cards were dealt, which I hate. But one of the things I was going to ask you about from the football side, is that something that since you've been there has that grown? Because like right now, the most that we have for football, and this has probably been our best summer, we have about maybe 20 guys on our best day. There was times when I first started that we'd have like 6 guys like 2 or 3 years ago, and it's gotten to where it's 20, and a lot of it's older guys and guys that are going to contribute more. And then also, do your coaches or people in the community, obviously you guys are in a bigger city, so it's probably a little bit easier, but you guys help them kind of set up with jobs and things like that?
Yep. So when I first started, it wasn't like a big thing to be here in the summertime. So my first summer, I bet we had 10 to 15 guys. And then it's almost like it doubled. It's like we went from about 10 to 15 to about 25 to 30. Then, we got up to where we were at about 60 guys. And we've kind of stuck in that 60 to 70 range since then. But yes, we do have an advantage being on the south side of Indianapolis. There's a lot of internship opportunity. There's a lot of summer job opportunity, summer school. Our coaches, it's a huge deal to our coaches. And, it's like, hey, it's not mandatory, but, we know who's here and who's not, and so they kind of put it that way where the players, felt like, all right, I need to be there. But then what we have to do is we have to, as strength coaches, kind of provide them an environment in which they want to be here. And, they see the progress being made and those kind of things. And so I think, that's kind of how it's been over the last several years. The players have taken it over and been like, hey, if you're going to play, you need to be here. Like, that's what the upperclassmen are saying to the young kids. And we start telling them from the recruiting process, like, if you're going to come and play football at the University of Indianapolis, you can't just enjoy game day. Like, you've got to enjoy the work that goes into it, and it's year-round process. And the nice thing is a lot of times I know strength coaches are preaching that, but it's not being echoed by the coaches, right? And so with the fact that our football that our football coaches do back us on that is huge. And so they help the kids get housing. They help the kids get jobs, internships, those kind of things. So they're backing us 100%. Now, with that being said, like that's the case with football, that's the case with volleyball, but we don't see our soccer teams, men's or women's. The majority of our men are off playing. They're playing on these club teams or whatever it is. And on occasion, we'll get a few of the women's players to come through, but so we do battle that to an extent. But again, that comes down to the importance of it from the coaching standpoint and that kind of thing. So,
so then that's that's the thing. And we have a new head coach, new football coach, and he came from a program that had more guys. He was actually at IUP, which was obviously is always a top tier program. And then he was at University of Charleston, which is also a legit top tier like athletics department. So he's kind of more used to it and been pushing the envelope a lot more this year. So this is like it's been our best summer by far. So then let's get into like the in season. So what does football kind of in season look like in terms of number of days that you guys lift, and maybe like a quick little summary of what each day, like are you kind of doing like a dynamic kind of max effort type split, or what does that look like in season?
Yeah. So if you're a high minute guy, starter, guy that rotates in, guy that plays all the time, you're going to train 2 times a week. The day furthest from the next competition is going to be the heavier day. So that's going to be more of our, now I don't really kind of use like the dynamic day or more intense type, but we're going to squat, we're going to clean, those are going to be a little bit heavier on the day furthest from the next competition. So we're going to throw in some accessory work, some mobility work, obviously. The day closest to the next competition is going to be a lot of accessory work. There'll be some bench press in there, that kind of thing. Followed up again by a lot of mobility, flexibility work, that kind of thing. If you're a non-travel guy or a low minute type guy, you'll come in on Fridays for your third lift, and that's where we start to introduce kind of what the off season is going to look like. We have an hour or 45 minutes to an hour, depending on whether we're at home or on the road. But we'll get those guys in here and really start to teach them the tempo at which we train. We'll start to work a lot more on the technical side of things, because I don't have a real short, time span that I have to work with here. I can work with this whole hour and get more done. And by the time we get to the end of the season, these guys are rolling at the tempo we want. They're prepared for the off season when we come back in January. So that's kind of the whole point of that. And they get stronger along the way. That's where we start to get some training maxes on these guys, those kind of things. But we got to make sure we get things taught first. And so that's a really good piece. I think more freshmen play now because of the whole transfer portal and the way this all works out. But, a few years ago, we hardly had any freshmen that played. So we had our entire freshman group basically in here on that Friday getting prepared to tackle what we're going to be doing in January. And it was a beautiful thing. So, but yeah, so we have more freshmen, I think, travel and play now than we ever have. So we got to get those guys caught up in the wintertime. But that's kind of how we set things up. I mean, keep it simple, and we kind of adjust as we go in season. But we run them on Sunday, so I'll take them and run those guys, and we just kind of stride things out, those kind of things. And so that's how we kind of do our in season.
So you guys game on Saturday, like a little stretch and stroud on Monday, and then or on Sunday. And then are you giving them Monday off and then lifting Tuesday, Thursday?
So Monday's off, and then we'll have lifting groups on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then that group on Friday. So I take that back then. We used to not do the Sunday run, so we would have Monday and Wednesday for the varsity guys, the high minute guys. Tuesday and Thursday then would be kind of our non-travel guys, and then they would come in on Friday as well. So it's not a perfect scenario, but it worked for us. Now we get those varsity guys on Tuesday and Thursday, and then those low minute guys will train on Wednesday and Friday.
Gotcha.
So instead of getting those 3 days, they get 2. Yeah.
Right. And that's something that, and I'll say this too, like I agree with you. I mean, I'm a big believer in like still trying to train at a relatively high intensity in season, obviously low volume, high intensity, and trying to, even if the illusion of us trying to, like, I kind of play the sports psychology game of, hey, we're going to try to get better in season. And if we maintain, then we win. But if we go into it with the mentality of, hey, we're just going to maintain, then I've seen it to where like kids just come in and be like, oh, I'm never going to go heavier than 135 on anything. Cause they've already in their mind made up their decision 2 weeks into the season. So I kind of caution on that, but I will say, last year was the first year that we added that third, because this is only my third football season at Fairmont. And last year was the first year that we added. No, we did it the year before. So last year was the second year, but last year was the most consistent that we were, where our non-travel squad guys lifted every single Friday of the fall. And I mean, you add that up, it ends up being 12 extra training sessions that they're getting. Yeah. And we always did something. It was always like an hour long. And then we'd always like, my GA ran it. And it was always one of those things where he would have them lift for, 45 minutes to almost an hour. And then they would do some sort of, a relay race or a sled push or something, kind of a finisher. And again, that also got them, it gave them something to compete. In my opinion, it almost gave them something to compete for on Fridays, that because they weren't getting to compete on Saturdays. So I really kind of looked at that. And I think that's extremely valuable for a football program, to be able to get that extra lift in. So I love that we're doing it and you guys are doing it. And it just seems like makes the most sense. So real quick, kind of getting into, basketball for a minute. You mentioned, or you could be any sport. It could be basketball or softball. Obviously, you guys had a great softball season this year. Your men's basketball team also went to where you guys made it to the conference tournament or region championship game?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, what do those sports that you have a little bit more time to kind of develop throughout the school year, what do they look like in the off season? So basketball in the fall, softball in the fall, and then what does it look like kind of in the in season? Do you cut it down to 1 day a week, 2 days a week, or are you still doing little small sessions?
I'm really trying, like with basketball, I'm really trying to kind of conduct it in the way in season, like with football. We're gonna do 2 days, regardless, and then that third day for those, we've had non-travel guys train every day of the week before in some circumstances. That's kind of comes down to the basketball coach, but we've taken those red shirt guys and really put a lot of time into them, and now they those are guys that we're going to be counting on a little bit more this year. So the developmental side is huge, but as far as basketball is concerned, we're taking the same lifts, kind of the same template that we do with football, but now we're changing it because I clean, like when we clean our basketball guys, it's going to be from about 3 blocks, and we use the DC blocks, just levers. I mean, you're talking long athletes. We had 2 7-footers on our team. We had 6'4" is short on our basketball team, and so every guy's going to be different, like when we'll do simple exercises like a trap bar deadlift, and some guys are pulling from the floor and some guys are pulling from blocks and those kind of things. We're just making sure that we've got them in a good position. These guys are going to squat, so we've got options when it comes to that for our basketball players, right? The majority of our guys can do a front squat fairly well when they've got their heels on a slant board elevated. If they can't, they might be doing a goblet squat with a kettlebell. They might be on the belt squat, over there working on that. But, they're going to squat in some form or fashion unless they are just a complete wreck, and then that's when we'll start doing some backward sled drags and some different posterior chain type movements to kind of, work on those areas. But, you know, how it is. You've got it all set up. Here are my progressions. Here's what we're going to do. And then you go by the individual from that point on. Right. And luckily enough for us, like I'm thinking back to our basketball team the last 4 years, we really only had one guy that really needed to be on a completely different program from everybody else. He was a 7-foot guy from Germany that came in at 203 pounds, had never lifted. We got him in 2020, so we got him during COVID. And what we would do is we would do some, we were doing everything online. So we would have challenges, right? So we would do like a push-up challenge, and everybody had to send in their video or, whatever it would be. And he's like, I can't do push-ups, and I'm like, man, we got work to do with this guy. Fast forward to now, he left here this year and transferred up, but, he was 240 pounds, and getting strong. I wouldn't say he turned into like a great squatter, but he would belt squat, and, he was learning to bend. He was learning, he was becoming more mobile, just getting overall, just strength overall and building his confidence. And it just made him a better player, And so, I know I'm going way off topic here of what the question was, but, when it comes to basketball, I almost think to myself, how can I take my football program, right, and use that same template with basketball, knowing I'm going to have to change some things because of the types of guys that I'm working with. And that's the way we approach it. And our basketball coach, played basketball for us, and I coached him when he was an athlete, and he played football for us. So he loved the football mentality for a basketball player. And so he left after this year because he took a job at IUPUI, so went up to the Division I level. It's IU Indianapolis now, but for the last 4 years, man, we really developed these guys. We were a very physical basketball team. We even had one of our players that got a tryout for the Indianapolis Colts because he's 6'7", he's 250, and he's about 7% body fat, 6% body fat. Like, this kid was legit, and built more like a football player than a 5, but was also one of the best. Was an two-time All-American at the D2 level. So, it was fun. It was fun, because I know a lot of times, a lot of strength coaches get very, they get a little bit nervous when they work with guys that are that tall, that long, those kind of things. And I think sometimes, man, you gotta build a little toughness in these guys, and convince them, like, hey, if you're doing this, this, and this, you're not going to throw your shot off. You're not going to, you're going to be fine, but we're going to be a physical basketball team.
Yeah, no, that's basically the similar mentality and same kind of process of how we've gotten our basketball program. And really, I'll tell you this more than anything else, our women's basketball team might be my most enjoyable team to work with at times. And they were conference champions this year. Mm-hmm. But it's funny because we also had a 6 foot, I don't know what Seth is. He's 6'7", 6'5", 6'7", something like that, somewhere in that range. Same thing, 255 pounds. We had one of our football players was getting scouted by an NFL team, and they had him run a 40, and they ended up asking the basketball player to also run a 40 because they're looking at him for a potential tight end. And he actually was also we do an annual strength and conditioning award, and he was our male award winner this year because he treated the weight room how we all expected to be treated. And he happened to also play basketball. So it's like one of those things where he probably is better in the weight room than he was on the court at times. But he also was just a team guy and a hard worker and the type of person that we all kind of want to be around. And we also have given it to one of our women's basketball players a couple of years ago because she was the same mentality, just wanted to be in the weight room, wanted to get better. So I think they're really fun. Another thing that you mentioned too about deadlifting and stuff, this is honestly a case for a lot of our athletes, but our men's basketball team never deadlifts off the floor. Doesn't
Right.
even the guys that are my height. Like I'm 5'7". Like you said, our shortest, some of our shorter guys, or some of our taller guys on the basketball team that play. Sorry, some of our shortest guys on our basketball team that actually play a lot of minutes. They're 6'7", so they're literally a foot taller than me. Me doing a sumo deadlift from the ground is
Yeah.
basically the equivalent of them doing sumo deadlifts off 2 blocks. So to me, it's
Right.
like we have to meet them where they're at and meet their biomechanics, and it just doesn't do us any justice. One of our best players came to me about halfway through the season last year, and we were doing like hand supported speed squats, and he's like, hey, he's an international player. He's like, hey, can I just do split squats? I'm like, split squats are fucking harder than hand supported squats. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do rear foot elevated split squats. If that's what you want to do, I'm all for it. Like, let's do it. So it's one of
Right.
those things where being able to also like have your, that's something that for me, I've had to really probably develop a lot as a coach is like, no, here's the plan. Here's what we got to do. Everybody's got to fall in line versus my mentality now of like, hey, here's the plan, but it's not the only plan. Like I need to be able
Right.
to meet and adapt to what you guys are as humans, because what I like to do and what I expect in the weight room isn't what you guys like to do and what you expect to do in the weight room. And I
Yeah.
think something that, I think gets lost in the shuffle is as much as we love being in the weight room and coaching, that's how much they love basketball. And it's like,
Exactly.
how little I care about basketball is how little they care about being in the weight room. Like,
Exactly.
so we have to be able to understand that that's kind of the mentality that we're all kind of coming at this from.
And,
On that note, I was
yeah.
going to ask you then, so kind of like, this is a little bit more of like a philosophical question, but from your kind of perspective and having been in this world for 20 plus years now, like, what do you think our main role is? Like, if you were to tell a young strength coach, like, hey, your role, your realistic expectations as a strength coach, what is that? And how do we measure if we're even successful? Like, if our basketball team loses every game, but everybody squats 4 out of 5 or more, like I did my job, but is my success going to be measured the right way? So it's one of those things where what does success look like, and how can we even measure that, or should we even worry about measuring it?
Winning, winning and success is different everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Um, you got to understand when you go someplace, you're a piece of the puzzle. Okay. You are a piece of the puzzle. Every piece has to be doing their job for it to be successful. Okay. We can do our job to the highest level, get them strong, get them physical, get them, keep them on the field or the court or the pool or whatever it is, keep them healthy. We can do all of that, but you got to go all the way from the top and work the way down and look and say, is everybody doing their job? Coaches have to recruit well. The ATs have to do their job well. The academic people need to be doing their job to the standard. Everybody's got to be doing their part to the standard of what that head coach or that athletic director or president has set for the school, right? So I think a lot of times the biggest thing that we can do as strength coaches is create the culture. You know, you need to go by what the head coach of that team, what his culture is. You've got to echo that. But here in our situation, and this, coach, we've got a culture that we set in this weight room, and it bleeds over to the teams. Okay. Um, because we're in a situation where we affect every single team at the Division II level. It's not like D1 where they hire their own strength coaches. You've got an Olympic side, you've got a football guy, you've got a basketball guy. That's not the way we operate. So when you talk about we have a culture in this weight room, this is the tempo at which we're going to work. This is, these are the rules, or so to speak, that we have in here. This is the expectation of how we do things. We're going to work to a certain standard. And if you don't fall in line, then you aren't going to last. And so I think, you know, I think a very, very important thing is to build the culture, continue to strengthen the culture, and then reinforce it. As when things don't go well, we continue to work this way, you know, because the easiest part of our job is the sets, reps, and all that. That's the easiest part of our job, right? There's a thousand ways to do it that work. Okay, what we got to be able to do is, you know, build a culture that's going to allow success and put these athletes in a position to where they can be successful. And this goes back to what we were just talking about. You've got to be able to communicate with the athlete, and you got to listen to them. You know, a lot of these kids come from high schools where, you know, I don't know how it is out in West Virginia, but we have a lot of really good strength and conditioning programs at the high school level. So when a kid comes from I'm going to find out what they did. You know, what's worked for you? What do you think helps you get better? And then I'll work with them. It doesn't mean I'm going to just let them do their own thing. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if I try to force something on them that's not working, you know, that kind of thing, you know, I want them to be able to talk to me about it, and I want to be able to fix it. And I want to be able to work around it. And I'm willing to do that, you know, and if I don't agree with what they're doing, I'll tell them why. I mean, I want to be very transparent. I want to be very direct with them, and I want them to do the same thing with me. Because if they're trying to hide things, or if they're trying to like, oh, I'm okay, whatever you say, coach, and then, no, don't. If you don't agree with me, tell me. You know, let's talk about this like adults. Because I tell them all the time, I'll treat you like an adult until you give me reason not to. And I think sometimes, especially young coaches, and I know there's a lot of young coaches listening to this right now, you have to go into a weight room and command control, right? Once you've done this for a long time, you've kind of already established that, right? Like there's that certain level of respect. There's a culture that's been set. Now it's like, all right, let me meet you where you're at, like you said, and let's talk about some different things. And it's all the way down to little technical things like, you know, where I deadlift from, or how many blocks do I do power cleans from, or what, you know, just whatever it might be. But I think that's very, very important. So, and again, you know, kind of going back to the question, you know, you gotta understand and be very honest with yourself and everybody else what does winning mean at the level you're at or at the school you're at, right? Not every school is going to be able to go and win national championships now, you know, in all of the sports. I mean, we're a privately funded university. A privately funded school has never won the national championship in football, right? So how do we set our goals? Hey, one game at a time, you know, that whole thing. Win the conference, all right? If you win the conference, you get in the playoffs. And then we can try to make some moves from there, right? Maybe we can be the first team to win, the first privately funded school to win a national championship at the D2 level. But to go in and say, we're going to win the national championship this, I mean, come on, let's be real. Let's break this down to get ourselves to a point where maybe we can get there, but we got a long road to go before we can.
Yeah. Again, a ton of information, a ton of good information. I think a couple things that stand out to me, you know, and I don't know where I got this from. I'm sure I stole it from some more deep thinker than what I am, but they talk about, you know, especially and go back to this role being that developmental aspect, you know, are we developing winning or are we developing winners? Because like, at the end of the day, most of our kids are not going to get to go make money playing professional sports. So we want them to be winners in the classroom, in the weight room, on the field, and then that way they can go be winners in whatever job and family and everything that they go on to have.
Yep.
You know, I think that's something that's huge. And that's something that, again, I probably take for granted sometimes, but it's probably my favorite thing about this whole job is seeing a kid that was a shithead when they were a freshman. So by the time they're a senior, they're one of my favorite players on our teams. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
There's a female athlete that we have that is jumps out right away because she came out from a very tough upbringing. And last year, her and I butted heads on everything. Because when she was having a bad day, she would just be a distraction to the whole team. And just watching her growth through this sophomore year, now going into her junior year, like I'm looking forward to having her back on campus. Like whereas 2 years ago, I was like, I can't wait for this. Hopefully this girl transfers. But now it's like I can't wait for her to come back because she's so fun to be around. Because now that she knows who I am and I kind of know a little bit more about her, like, you know, we're able to just even though we don't see eye to eye on stuff, we're able to kind of get past that because we're all training for the same. We're all kind of putting our you know, ourselves out there for a common goal. You know, so I love that aspect of it, the mental aspect. And then, And I agree with you too, with the extent of like being realistic. Like every football kid that walks through our door says they ran a 4.3 in high school. If you ran a 4.3 in high
Right.
school, you wouldn't be playing at Fairmont State. Like I can tell you that.
Correct.
I can tell you that right
And
now.
they're not playing at
So
UND either. I'm telling you.
yeah, so you didn't run a 4.3. Your high school coach was lying to you. You actually run a
Right.
4.7, and let's make it a 4.65, and then you'll
Hmm.
be an awesome Division II football player. Like
Exactly.
let's have realistic goals and realistic expectations and live in the real world. And then the one thing that is kind of funny, you mentioned about how all the high school kids that you guys get from out there all have really good high school training experience. That is the opposite of Fairmont, West Virginia. Unless we get some kids from maybe some private schools in PA or private schools in Ohio, most of our kids, especially our female athletes, unfortunately, have never touched a weight in their life,
Yep.
which sucks. But again, that goes back to like what is my job, and our job at this level? It's development. And honestly, there's sometimes where I'd rather an athlete come in with no training experience, because that means they
Yep.
have no bad habits, and they're gonna see very quick improvements, versus a kid that already comes in. Like if I have a high school football kid comes in, he already squats 455 and benches 315. Like, so I don't know how much I'm going to be able to help you. I really don't. Like, I'm going to be able,
Right.
at least from a strength standpoint, I might be able to help you with a lot of other stuff, but from a strength development standpoint, like you're probably as good as we need you to get to in that realm.
Yeah.
Um, I want to ask you one other kind of big question, and then we'll do some quicker questions for these younger coaches on here. One of the other things that I heard you talk about on the Moffitt Method podcast was the fueling station and the sports nutrition stuff that you have there. Can you kind of just like revisit that and just remind me exactly what kind of setup you guys have and maybe how that all got like initiated? Because that's something that we don't have at Fairmont as well, and I think is a huge thing, a huge room for us to grow.
Yeah. So this has been a long time coming. Like we started off by doing chocolate milk. Okay. So we would provide chocolate milk for our athletes, have it in the fridge, 2 per athlete, that kind of thing. Um, so,
Was that something?
and
Sorry,
again,
was that something that you guys started off with all of your athletes? So like all 600 athletes that you guys had, were you able to get? Was that 2 a day or 2 per training session or 2 per week? Like how? I just I just need to know what my realistic expectations, if I were going to try to implement this year one, would be.
so that was 2 per training session. Okay. Now, not everybody takes advantage of it. I don't force it upon anybody. We have an alternative for those that have like dairy issues, lactose intolerance, that kind of thing. So we do have something for them, but so we started off with that, and like I said, it's 2 per training session, and so now it's kind of evolved into an entire station where we have our athletic trainer. He'll put in the order for food. Um, so let me go back. We used to have like a 19 meal plan for our student athletes, right? A 19, a 14, a 12. I think that's it. Um, but we did away with the 19s. So everybody's on a 14 or lower. Okay. And that was a way to kind of just, it's a money saver, because you know how it is at the D2 level, man. At times you gotta cut some things somewhere. But so in place of that, all right, we can do different fruits, snacks, those kind of things, and have those available in the weight room. It's not a supplement for a meal by any means, but it's just our way of making sure that when we get done training, you know, we can send them out the door with, protein shake, because we have a contract through Muscle Milk. Um, you know, 2 chocolate milks, Muscle Milk, piece of fruit, snack, and at least they're getting something in their system when they get done training. And a great number of athletes take advantage of that. Not all of them, but most of them do. And so that's big when it comes to like working with our nutritionist. Um, they're aware of what we have. So, she can then kind of, you know, give them some insight as to, hey, this is what you need to be taking after you train. This is what you need to be eating when you go to the cafeteria, that kind of thing. But, you know, I say our nutritionist. Okay, let me kind of go back on that a little bit. So we have, that's a resource that we have through Community Health, which is our health provider. And so she works very short hours with us, right? So there's just not enough time for her to really get with all of the athletes. Um, so really, we send the extreme cases to her. But really, when it comes to the nutrition side of it, that's where myself and our staff kind of take care of that. We'd fill out food logs, we give them recommendations, we do everything we can except give them, diets, because that's, you got to walk the line, but you can't cross it. And but a lot of times, if you give them a food log and tell them to fill it out for 7 days, you can get a feel for why they're having the issues that they're having. Now, if it's you know, if you've got a suspicion that there's something going on that's beyond what I can help them with, that's when we refer them to the nutritionist. But so that's kind of the way we operate with that. But yeah, this nutrition station has been a big thing for us. It's big in helping us with the recruiting process. We'll have it set up when we bring recruits in, and it's just little things that add up. It really is. It's like, oh man, like they have resources there. They're spending money. They want to help us get better. They want to help us. And when I do my recruiting spiel, it's going to be like, hey, the added nutrition helps us stay healthy, helps us stay on the field, those kind of things. And those are the things that the kids, whatever, their heads are spinning when they're here on a visit. But the parents want to hear that kind of thing. Oh, they got, they want to help our kids stay healthy, not just get big and strong and huge and fast, So, you got to cater to the parents too when you do these, because I'm telling you, and I think this is important for all the young coaches to understand. When you're at the D3, D2, NAIA, Division I level, it doesn't matter. You are a part of the recruiting process. You are a big part of recruiting. Okay. And it comes down to more than just lifting weights. I mean, it's how you're going to develop these guys, how you're going to, help in their nutrition, how you're going to help them stay healthy, how you're going to make them the best that they can be physically, for their 4 years here. And you got to sell it. You got to sell it.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something that, I wanted to kind of go back on that, because I forgot to mention this when you were talking about, like, the cool thing about the D2 level is, like, whatever our kind of weight room culture is, like, especially for like, it sounds like what you guys do and what I do at Fairmont is everybody kind of lives and breathes the same weight room culture. And then it kind of like matriculates out into like what your individual team identity is, and how do we mesh that with like coaching personality. Cause I pretty much coach all of our athletes the same way. Now, obviously I might yell and say certain words to our football players that I might not say to, our women's soccer team and things like that. But
you got to.
But the standard is the same. The expectation is the same. If a football player is doing a pull-up and a softball player is doing a pull-up, they're going to look the exact same. The rep integrity, the quality is going to be the same. And that goes back to like the recruiting aspect. That's something that I tell the parents. And honestly, again, the recruiting was something that I never realized that I was going to have to do until I got into the D2 level. But I like talking to parents. I like giving my little 10-minute sales pitch and talking to the parents. But what I was going to say is the number one question that I always get, or the most common question that I get is, what do you guys do? You write meal plans for the kids? Right. It's not, again, it's the parents asking me, do you guys have protein shakes for them? And it's it's my most popular question, but it's also I hate the answer is, unfortunately, we don't have that right now. It's something that we've been working on, and it is true. I have been trying to work on it. But I hate not being able to tell the parents, yes, like, we're doing everything possible to take care of your son and daughter, because we aren't doing everything possible because we don't have that little, it seems like a little resource, but it makes a huge impact.
And that's something that's beyond your control right now, but keep pushing. I mean, it took me 13 years to really get it to where I wanted. I don't even know if it's completely where I want it yet. Right. I mean, I would like to have like a whole room set up that they can go into and like a Division I type level, but keep pushing it. Don't give up on that part, because as frustrating as it gets, you just can't stop working on that kind of thing. And it might be one little tiny thing at a time, but eventually it'll add up. And then, they'll be sold on it once they see the benefit that you get. I mean, it helps with everything. It just helps with the morale. It helps, the kids, as crazy as it sounds, like if we took chocolate milk away, they'd be like, what the hell? Like that's a big deal. It's a big deal. Just chocolate milk. The same little cartons of chocolate milk we got when we were in elementary school means something to college athletes. It really does.
Yeah. Well, and I can to an extent I can completely understand why, because they're especially like at the D2 level where you don't have like, when I was in undergrad at WVU, if you want to take biology 101, there's 30 different classes you can take. At Fairmont, there's maybe 2 or 3 regular classes
Right.
and 1 or 2 labs. So we have kids sometimes that'll have 5 or 6 hours of class, lift, and then have an hour break before practice. And it's like sometimes they don't have time to go and actually get a sit down meal and fuel their body up properly. So as simple as it seems, like it's a no brainer to me that a little chocolate milk goes a long way, or a banana, or in a protein bar or whatever, goes a long way for a college kid that's on the go. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm definitely, every time I think about it, it like remotivates me to want to make sure that I see this thing come to fruition. So I guess a couple things for these young coaches. A couple of last minute questions here. Um, what are some things maybe that like biggest things that you've learned? And whether it's some of the stuff we've already talked about a little bit in terms of just being able to pull different philosophies and things that work. But I guess really just like how has this profession kind of changed, and how have maybe you changed? What did you think 20 years ago? What did you think this job entailed versus what does it actually entail? Like kind of something along those lines. Like what is if you're a coach that's in year one, or when you were a coach and you were in year one, like some of the people that are on this call, what do they have to maybe look forward to in terms of changes that you've seen?
Yeah. Well, so you know, we can talk about like technology. We can talk about those kind of things. I don't really use technology just because I can't. um, right before COVID hit, we had a deal with Perch done where we were going to use Perch to do velocity based training. And that's a big deal. Like that's expensive, especially for a Division II school, and but I was pushing for it. But you know, when COVID hit, that changed everything. And all of a sudden that was off the table, like not happening. So it's like I have to continue to be like have a great coach's eye on things. And after doing this for so long, you know, I can kind of determine where we need to go, based on bar speed and things like that, and make adjustments on the fly, those kind of things. But what I would say to a young coach when it comes to things like that, because I know technology is a big, big deal, get your coach's eye first. You know what I'm saying? Don't just rely on technology from the get go. You know, learn how to teach all of these movements technically as perfectly as you can, right? Then like I know what 80% looks like on a squat or on a clean. I know what 85 looks like on a squat or on a clean. I know what 90 looks like. And these young kids right now don't, because they just haven't had the experience. I've watched thousands of reps, and you're on your way to watching thousands of reps. Before you know it, you're going to be like, I've watched so many squats. I don't know what, my head spins, but you know, these are the things, like every time you're watching a rep, you're looking for certain things. And when you've coached thousands of athletes, after a while, you get a pretty good feel for what that is. So what I'm saying is have that ability. If you don't have the chance to have technology, you got to be able to do this without it. Right. And I know a lot of young coaches now, the first experience they get in the strength world, they're collecting data and watching it on video, and everything's, kind of, those numbers are just spit out for them, and they're recording that data. And that's all good and great. I'm not against it by any means, but you got to know what you're doing, you know, on the floor, and not relying on technology to you know to be able to spit that out for you. Like you got to know when to make adjustments and those kind of things. And then, you know, So kind of going back to the question, um, what? Sorry, I've kind of lost the train of thought. Go
No,
go back and tell
you're
me.
good because I'll re-ask it and kind of tie into the next question I was going to ask anyway. But I want to kind of follow up because I agree with you. Like, I think like I love the sports science stuff. Like when I was in pro baseball, we did that a lot. But
Yeah,
being at Fairmont, we've had to basically get away from it because we don't have all the same technology that we had. That we don't have force plates, we don't have velocity based devices and things like that.
right.
And I think to me the simplest analogy, and you'll probably appreciate this as a power lifter. I don't know if I want to say former power lifter, but as a power lifter, it's like doing geared powerlifting when you can't already squat 315. Like
Right.
don't jump into trying to have the technology say like help you be a better like take the role of being a good fucking strength coach first and foremost. Like you have to be able to know what a good squat looks like and know how to coach up a bad squat before you worry about what percentage of bars or what millimeters per second of bar speed the athlete's
Yeah.
even doing it at. Like you, like I said, I agree with you. You would know, and obviously you've got twice as many reps of watching, or you've watched twice as many reps as I have, and I feel like I'm just now kind of starting to get to that point where like I can look at a rep and be like, all right, take 10 pounds off or add 10 pounds
Hmm.
because it's not where even if we're not going off velocity base, it doesn't look like what 85% should look like in my mind. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
that's where, and then when you actually on the back end, when you do have some of those velocity based devices and you throw it on there, it kind of just almost validates what us as coaches that have been doing this, like what we kind of already assumed to an extent. Um,
Yeah.
but what I was asking was like maybe I guess maybe some growing pains, maybe some mistakes. I guess is kind of what I should have maybe how I should have referenced that. Like, what are some growing pains that you've maybe had as a coach that obviously maybe you wouldn't change them because they've made you who you are, but that maybe you could save one of these other young coaches from maybe making the same mistake.
Yeah. I think a big thing, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is um, not to chase numbers, right? To make sure that they're technically sound first and foremost, um, in the weight room, and just I've really been on this mission to take all the complex information and make it as simple. Every year, I want to make my program more simple than it was the year before. Um, and the reason for that is a lot of times first year coaches, it's very important to them to look extremely smart, right? And and so they want to draw up these cards that nobody can understand. Um, then they put it out there, and the athletes are like, they're what the hell does this mean? You know what I'm saying? And and I get that to an extent, but I don't. Um, but I mean, I think we're all smart enough to know that when we program, we put these programs together. You are taking a lot of science, a lot of complex information, and you've got to make it simple for the athletes. Because what you said earlier, Coach, is the way we view this field is not the way they view it. You know, they're not here to lift; they're here to play a sport. So they want to have all this put simply to them so that they can move through it fast and that kind of thing. And then we control that from there. But, you know, do not get enamored by a lot of the things that you see um, on Instagram, on all that stuff. Like, be very careful with that. Be careful who you reach out to. Be careful. You got to learn to sift through the bullshit to find what's really applicable, what's really going to help them be better on the field or on the court or wherever. Um, and like I said, I may do this for another 20 years, and I'm going to try to make it even more simple every year. That's what I'm always trying to do. That way, I think it becomes more efficient for the athlete. So does that kind of answer your question a
No,
little bit?
yeah, absolutely, and it's really really funny, and I don't know if ironic's the word or not, but that's exactly where I'm kind of starting to get to in my coaching career and coaching progression. And for the three or four people that are still on here from my staff, like I know for sure. I've told Tyler and Jacob for sure that are on here. I've told them that in the last couple of weeks of like, if my training programs have done anything, they've gotten less like glitz and glam over the years and way more just like let's stick to the basics. Like we just need to squat, we need to hinge, we need to push
Yep.
pull, we need to do some plyos, we need to sprint, and then everything else is fluff. Like you mentioned the word fluff. In baseball, we call that eye wash, right? All
Yeah.
that other shit is eye wash. All the shit you see on Instagram is eye wash. Like just you can do all the extra accessory work, but if you're not under a bar and you're not sprinting and you're not jumping, then you're probably leaving a big portion of your training on the table.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's awesome. Last, I guess I'll tie these kind of two questions together because I do want to respect everybody's time and kind of wrap it up here. But so when you're looking to maybe hire a young coach, or when you see a young coach that's maybe ready to go off and get a job somewhere else, what are you looking for? And then also, what do you kind of like? What makes a young coach, a good hire, or somebody that you would be willing to recommend to somebody else?
Yeah. So for me, I need, when I'm looking for coaches, I'm looking for first and foremost a fit, right? So are they going to fit with our staff? And then, I'm not always looking for the guy that's got the most, the certifications. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about the degree. I'm not worried about, I want somebody who is, who is passionate about the field and has like how it is. You interview people or somebody wants to come in for an internship and they're like, yeah, you know, I'm really, my degree is for to be like a PT, but I want to have a background in strength conditioning. I'll let you intern, but I'm probably not going to hire that person because this isn't what, how it is. I mean, you're talking 12-hour days at the minimum a lot of times. If this isn't something you're passionate about, it ain't going to work, right? And I hate to say it, but I mean, you got to be upfront, you got to be honest with them. Is this something you really love doing? And I think that's why internships are so important because they figure that out, And I think we've sent a lot of our coaches to different places professionally. We've sent 5 of them to LSU. We've sent guys to Baylor, like you're saying, a lot of different places, and high school all the way up to professional. And the ones that I recommend when they're going for those jobs, are those that are the grinders, the ones that don't watch the clock. They're not worried about what time it is. They're here to do a job. They know what their job is, and they're going to put in the extra time, the extra effort, those kind of things. What, look around, which guys take notes, which guys are, who can take notes and be able to regurgitate that back to you and start to talk the language, so to speak. And so you can find out a lot about somebody just in their internship, but who wants it? And also, if you're a young strength coach, and I think I've already said this once, get out there and get face to face and market yourself and talk to people. It means a lot. I had a kid, and you watched the Moffitt Method podcast one, where I had a kid, Cody Stout, and Moffitt had him on the podcast. But he has an awesome story of where on spring break he went to LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss, Florida State in 1 week. And he drove and slept in his car in the parking lot and waited for them to come in. And that's when he caught him. And that's when he, but he set this all up in advance. He packed a cooler full of sandwiches and all that kind of shit. And then, he slept in his car for an entire week, just in the parking lots of all these places, because he wanted to get the information from those coaches, get to know them. And then, down the road, 2 of them hired him, I mean, it says a lot. It just says a lot to get out there and get face to face. I know it's easy to make connections through email, through social media, through text, whatever. That's great. But get out there and meet these coaches face to face. I'm telling you, it means something. And, if you're really passionate about that, those are the things that you'll do. And I even, I encourage, my coaches, like, get out there and meet as many people as you can. And it doesn't have to be major Division I college coaches. Like, if you look at my thank yous when I do like a seminar or a clinic, just about every person on there is either a high school strength coach or at one time was a high school strength coach. Because I feel like, from a developmental standpoint, those guys are the best. Those are the best. They have the hardest job as being a high school strength and conditioning coach. When you work with the middle school kids and the high school kids, that is the prime time for development for a human. And so, I'm going to try to learn as much as I can from those really, really, really good high school coaches, and especially the high school coaches who've then gone on to college. And that's what Tommy Moffitt had done. And so he gets it, and so, like I said, man, if you're passionate about the field, you'll do more than just sit and watch YouTube videos and Instagram. Like, you'll get out there and learn from, and you got to learn to live broke a little bit, so you got to spend a little bit of money. You got to do those kind of things, and you got to take some risks. And I think that's important for, getting into this field and staying in this field.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, it's one of the things where when I interview, first of all, I appreciate you saying all that, because that last 5 minutes right there might be the most important 5 minutes of the whole call, because the biggest point of these calls is to help these young coaches. I learned a lot. I learned a lot the first hour and a half. That last 5 minutes was the most important for these young coaches. So it's huge. And a couple of things that you said. Number one, you said the word passion like 10 times. All the Fairmont people that are on this call, what's the most important thing that we ever talk about in the weight room, which is being passionate about what you do, being willing to suffer, right? Passion comes from the Greek for passios, which is to suffer. So being willing to suffer. And believe me, as a strength coach, like, you're going to fucking suffer sometimes. You're going to suffer from missing hanging out with your friends and your buddies, to not having any money, to sleeping in your car, to doing that kind of shit. And again,
Yep.
For better or worse, like, I look at that as, I hate that that's our profession, because that means we also all work for chump chains for most of our careers, but it also gets rid of the people that don't really want to do this.
Correct.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I listened to that Moffitt Method podcast with that guy as well. But the second thing with that is, if I'm interviewing somebody for a position, for intern, GA, even an assistant, paid assistant or whatever it may be, and they tell me, well, I like working out, so I figured I'd be a strength coach. Like, bro, like that ain't it. That's not enough. Like, just because you like training is not the same thing as yelling at people for 12 hours a day, for 60 hours a week, for the next 40 to 50 years of your life. Like, that is not enough. And it's like, I like playing pickup basketball, but I don't want to play basketball. Like, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not what it's about. So those are the most important things. And I agree with you. And that's something that part of the reason I'm also doing these calls is because I want to, not get stagnant, and I want to continue to network. And I know we're not face to face, but it's one of those things where networking is going to be huge. And again, for better or worse, this profession is, you're going to hire people that and sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a bad thing. But it is part of this deal, and we're all kind of living in it. So, to be honest, I usually like to let people ask questions. If anybody has like an absolute dying question, anybody on either staff, whether it's you got a lot of indie guys on here, guys and girls. I don't know if there's any female coaches, but anybody that has one quick question here at the end. Otherwise, we'll let everybody kind of move on with their schedule.
Yeah, I got one.
All right, go ahead.
What's the biggest thing that an intern can do right off the bat to add value to the staff and make them like a necessity to have, rather than just someone that's there just helping out? Like, what's the biggest thing that you've seen one of your interns do that made you say, oh yeah, that we need this guy. He can't be replaced. We need him. What's the biggest thing?
Yeah, I think one of the big things from the get-go is ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge the coach. You know what I'm saying? Why do you do this? And you don't have to be arrogant about it. You don't have to be an asshole about it, but you can, hey, why do you why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? The more I can get into a conversation with you, the more you're going to start to earn my trust and so forth and so. But, you know, those are the ones that eventually I can say, hey, you know what? Go warm that group up over there, or go warm that individual up over there. You know, hey, we got a new kid coming in. Go help him with the warm up. Can you teach him the, you know, the clean progression? Can you teach him the clean warm up? Like the ones that interact, you know, from the get go and continue to interact are the ones that you're going to, you know, remember more. Right. I mean, I've had a lot of interns. I've had people intern for me now that I don't remember. I mean, I'm just being honest. I'm not being an asshole. I'm just, you know, the ones that I remember are the ones that speak up, ask questions, like almost force you to, or almost force me to put them out there on the floor. Like you can tell they want to be interacting with the athletes. You know what I'm saying? One of the biggest things that impresses me, and I've told this to my staff, get to know the names of the athletes. If from day one you're shaking hands, introducing yourself, getting to know them, starting to get on a personal level with the athletes, guess what? They're going to respond to you quicker than the ones who do nothing but stand in the background. Because all they do with the kids that, you know, the interns that stand in the background, they'll look over at me and be like, hey, who the fuck is that? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, if I have to tell them who an intern is 3 weeks into their internship, they haven't made an impact on anybody and they haven't really said anything. Now, when I first get an intern in, I always tell them, hey, I want you to shadow a little bit, you know, ask questions, do those kind of things, just kind of get a feel for how we do things, but get involved as fast as you feel comfortable. And by saying that, it's like, all right, I figure out real quick who's ready to get to work and who's just kind of along for the ride, you know? And I have a great group of interns this summer. And I'm not just saying that because they're on the call, but you know, they've had a lot of interaction. I mean, I'm to the point now where I can take a step back, see the big picture of the room, and watch them kind of coach the different areas of the room, you know, and I mean, I've got to the point where I trust them on a day when it's kind of a performance day where we're getting we're changing some numbers on our training maxes and things like that, where I trust what they're telling me on this. You know, they're recording, but I also trust what they're telling me. And, you know, you can't always, you know, if we're to the point in an internship where I can't do that yet, then it's probably not in the cards for you. But, man, be vocal. There's nothing worse than an intern that just stands in the corner and is doing nothing but observing all the time. You know, if I have to force you to get out on the floor and start talking, you know, it might be a long road.
Yeah, and I think I would echo all of that. I completely agree. And honestly, probably in the last 4 to 5 years of running the internship program, obviously at Fairmont and then at the private gym that I help out at here in town as well, we've probably had over 100 interns, I would say.
Yeah.
And we do take someone that we know don't want to be strength coaches, but out of those 100, there's probably maybe 25 that if you show me a picture of them, I don't even remember their name. And I spend 4 months with them, like meeting with them once a week and doing online assignments with them and things like that. And out of those 25, like there's maybe only about 10 of them that have actually gone on to do something in the performance realm, whether it's athletic training or being a strength coach. And again, we know that to an extent coming into it, that some of them just want to check off hours for to get their degree and all that. And we try not to take those interns, but the ones that end up being strength coaches all do exactly what you're saying. They all ask questions. They're all open-minded. They're all like eager and chomping at the bit to get a chance to finally go coach a warm up. And they take notes. Like that was something that you mentioned too. And I was just telling my guys at Fairmont about that. Just bring a note card, bring a notebook with you and write shit down. Like there's no way that you can memorize every single thing that you saw during a day, all the questions that you had, all the things that you saw, all the shit that you learned. Like you're not going to memorize all that stuff. So write it down so you can ask somebody later.
I still take notes on the floor. Like, most days I'm taking notes, or I'm coming back in my office writing things down. Like, this helps me program. Like, when I have to tweak my program for the next year, these are the notes that I'm referring back to. But, I will say this. I get kind of like, I get going on a rant sometimes, and I get a little bit passionate about this, but I will say this. I've had interns before who I know they're not going to be strength coaches, and they're upfront with it. I have two people that have interned for me who are medical doctors, but they just wanted to, get a feel for the strength and conditioning world, because they know that when they become a doctor, they're going to have to refer. And I mean, that's smart on their part. So I know what I know that they're not going to want to be strength coaches. So I will kind of accommodate them for that. But, if I've got somebody that wants to be a strength and conditioning coach, and there's certain things that have to take place, and you got to get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and same with us at Pro. At Pro, we've had interns that, especially like they'll be ex-phys majors and they want to go to PT or OT or end up going to med school or a physician's assistant. But I will still say, like, the ones that I remember that end up not being strength coaches that still go on and do those other professions, like they still kind of are cut from that same cloth of where they still want to ask good questions. They want to be there. They'll show up early. They'll stay late. Like they're it's still kind of that same mentality. And I think, again, that goes back to the idea of, like, successful people are doing all the same stuff. They're all eager to learn. They're all eager to work hard. It's not just strength coaches. It's the doctors. It's the PTs. Like, the mediocre PTs probably didn't bring a notebook. The great PTs showed up to their internship that was outside of their profession and brought a notebook and took notes and showed up early.
Right.
So, well, Coach, and then everybody that's on here, I appreciate you inviting your staff and having them all on here. This has definitely been the biggest group of people that we've had on here. But I really appreciate your time. And like I said, once I get the recording and everything saved, I'll shoot it your way. And I'll also share with everybody. It's an unreleased YouTube channel. I'm not trying to, make it famous with it, but there's some videos of all of our previous coaching calls. And if any of the descriptions are intriguing to anybody, feel free to watch them, but I'll go ahead and shoot that link over to Coach as well. So that you guys can kind of have access to that. But yeah, Coach Barrick, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm so thankful that I reached out. So glad that I reached out to you, and so thankful for your time and your passion. Again, I think that both of us, you can definitely tell that this is something that we're very passionate about. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, man, I appreciate, this is awesome. This is awesome. For your interns, you guys are lucky. I'm telling you, you got a great mentor here. This is really cool. I kind of want to copycat this, for my future internships, but this has been really good. And, if there's any way that I can help you, Coach, or any of your interns, whatever, in the future, you know how to, find my information, whatever. I'd be more than happy to help out. So, yeah, keep doing this, man. This is a good thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we'll definitely stay in touch. I also forgot to mention, when you're talking about basketball, you guys just hired our former associate head coach, Devin. I don't know if you got a chance.
I just talked to him a little bit ago, man. Yeah. He said he had good things to say about you.
Yeah, Devin's a good dude, and he's he's gonna be missed. He's gonna be missed, and he's gonna be a huge value to your guys' program for sure. So
yeah, it's a big get for us, man. He's a good guy, man.
Yeah, like I said, Coach, appreciate it. Everybody on here, appreciate your time, and I'll get the information sent over to you. So thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you, guys.